Hello, everybody, and welcome to AMA's Lunchtime Learning series. My name is Maria Asuelimen, and I will be your presenter today. I want to do a quick tech check. If you could just type yes in the questions or chat box if you can hear me. I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me and view my screen. Please type yes if you can hear me and view my screen. Again, we'll be starting the webinar in about a minute. Just wanted to confirm that you can hear me and view my screen. Please tap yes in the questions box or chat box. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm assuming that everyone can hear me fine. Again, my name is Maria Asuelimen. I am the Managing Director of AMA Consulting.
Why is it hot? Launch.
And we're going to be discussing conflict management. I changed the topic from conflict resolution to conflict management because one of the things that my goal is to change how we discuss about conflict because a lot of times conflict has this negative connotation, and the reality is not all conflict, in generally speaking, is not bad, right? It's how we deal with it. That's what makes a difference. So, quick introduction. My bio is on the screen. My name is Maria Asuelimen. As I said, I'm managing director of AMA Consulting. I started the company 8 years ago. We offer professional services to the government. I'll go into a little bit about what we do. But my background is I'm an organizational development consultant, executive coach, and trainer by trade. Um, I've been in the government contracting space for over 16 years, worked in the private sector, then went to work for the government to include the U.S. Small Business Administration, where I worked with a portfolio of small businesses. So I'm really rooted in the small business community. I've done a lot of trainings for SBDCs, PTAC. Some of you who are on the webinar today probably saw it on the SBDC's calendar. Um, as I mentioned, I'm an executive coach as well. I work primarily with federal leaders to help them be effective and successful in their roles. So a little bit about AMA Consulting. As I mentioned, we are a professional services firm. Our clients are primarily the federal government, even although recently we have been getting requests from the DC government as well as the state of Maryland to come in and do strategy work and training and development work as well. So, three lines of service: organizational development, we do strategy articulation and execution. We do workforce development. I say high specialty because there are some new areas in the workforce like cybersecurity, or very high specialty areas like biotech research, where agencies, organizations are finding it hard to manage that workforce, to do the talent development, both with recruiting, managing their performance, and retaining them. We do a ton of trainings, soft skills trainings, or what I like to call business skills trainings, as well as technical trainings like project management, acquisitions, finance, analysis, and grants. Our second line of business is business program support. Because we work with government, the way government executes their operations is through programs. So we support programs in three particular areas. Process improvement, it is huge in the federal government in particular because the government is trying to do more high value work. And so they're trying to optimize, streamline their processes, not just what they do, but how they do it. So we support with that. One of the newest areas is robotic process automation, taking end-to-end processes and mapping them out, and then getting in automated or what I like to call digital assistance to create efficiencies for agencies. We also do some IT support, specifically assistive technology, helping agencies meet Section 508 and 504 compliance with the American for Disabilities Act, project management, and IT training. Okay, our clients are DoD agencies like DHRA, Defense Health Human Resources Activity, Navy, DTIC, as well as civilian agencies like the Department of Education, the Food and Drug Administration, NASA, and a host of others. So we're going to be discussing conflict today. Every time we hear about conflict, and I want this session to be interactive. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, or if you have a comment, I am going to be periodically looking in the chat box to make sure that I can respond to your questions or comments as we go along. Um, Conflict is like a negative thing, right? So when you hear conflict, everybody is like, oh, something is wrong, like. But I wanted to preface this conversation this afternoon by saying that in a team or in an organization where there is high trust, conflict should not be avoided because we live in a complex world. As human beings, we are complex beings. No two people are alike. No two people are going to look at a situation and see it exactly the same way. So we are complex beings, and we live in a complex a world. We live in a volatile world. We live in a fast-paced, changing world, and all of those things, the mix of all of that, our environment and our makeup individually as human beings, makes for conflict. And conflict is simply when there are opposing interests that have to be factored into the solution of a problem. It basically says we don't see things the same way, right? So if you, I want to say this, and this may be a little bit controversial. If you are in an organization, in a team, in an office where there is no conflict and everybody is always singing kumbaya, something is wrong somewhere. Either somebody is not speaking up and really putting their true ideas on the table, or there is the environment is not safe for people to feel comfortable to be able to voice their opinions, their ideas. So don't be alarmed, right? If you're experiencing conflict, even in a relationship, even in a work relationship or a personal relationship, don't get afraid or nervous when there is conflict, because one of the indications that there is trust or the environment is safe, or that it's a creative or innovative environment, is that there is conflict, which means that there are opposing interests and there is a problem to be solved. All right. Now, what I really wanted to focus on today is what happens when we don't see conflict the right way, or we are not equipped to manage conflict, right? Then that's when we have a negative response to it and we go into disagreements, contention, and rancor. Now, this is the part of conflict that can really, really tear up an organization. This is the part of conflict that can lead to a lack of productivity. It can lead to impasse or stagnation, where we're simply not able to make a decision because of conflict within a team. It can lead to stress. Workplace stress workplace issues is one of the leading causes of stress in the United States. And that's because of a lack of understanding of how to manage conflict. So these things are real. They're happening in our teams. They're happening in the organization as a whole. And I would say, it is the responsibility of the team. Sometimes I think a lot of times we look to leadership when it comes to conflict issues or sources, but it's a responsibility of everybody to be aware of conflict, the sources of conflict, and it's your responsibility for you to develop your own mechanism for managing conflict, because as you know, you only have control over yourself, right? You can't control your boss, you can't control your team member, and a lot of times you may work in an organization where you don't have a locus of control over the decision making on the high level that impacts your work. So the only thing that you can do is hopefully develop a mechanism for managing your conflict, and then modeling that to your team members and bringing that as a value, right, to your organization. So what are some of the sources of conflict? Internal locus. So that's internal, that's for you individually, where you can have conflict in a situation as a result of your values, your beliefs, your training, your knowledge, your own self-interest, your own ideas, what you think the solution should be based on your understanding, your beliefs of the problem. So internal locus is one source of conflict. A second source of conflict, and again, that's where you have more control, right? Remember, so that's where you have more control on the internal source of the conflict. The second source is organizational, right? So strategy issues, structure issues, systemic or process issues. These are the difficult ones. These are the ones where, the organization as itself, you may be an employee there, you may be a manager, an emerging manager or mid-level manager, and not be part of senior leadership that can really make the changes where this source of conflicts come from, right? On the organizational level. Again, feel free to chime in, giving examples, give your thoughts as we go through this. And then there's a team locus. So this source of conflict comes when two or more people come together to accomplish a purpose, and that's a team. And that team locus can also just be a relationship. It can be between you and just one other person. So where the conflict that results from team locus is as a result of power dynamics, is as a result of communication style and skill. When you are dealing with people, that this is a huge piece. So in my 16 years of experience in the federal space and also in industry as a manager and a leader and working with teams, communication style and skill is one of the biggest sources of team locus conflict. A lot of times you hear people say it's not what you said, but how you said it. And so this is a skill that in order for you to be successful as a manager, a leader, a business owner, even a team member, this is a skill that you should really work on and continually work on, right? Our workplaces are diverse. A lot of things that were acceptable a couple of years ago are no longer acceptable in terms of communication. And I'm not just speaking about verbal communication, I'm also talking about nonverbal communication, right? So developing the skill to be able to communicate, again, being original to your communication style, is a really big thing that you can do to help manage conflict better, right? Even when you have to have those difficult conversations, even when you have to, set a boundary in a team, when you have to give directive, when you have to deliver news that nobody wants to hear, or people are not going to be receptive towards. That communication piece is a big one. Emotional awareness is another one, or self-awareness. It could be another source of conflict within a team where people are not able to receive feedback as a result of their own lack of emotional awareness to be able to read not just their emotional state, but also the emotional state of their team members. Again, these are skills that you can develop, right? It's not, some people say, well, I'm just not a good communicator. Or I'm not just, I'm not good with people. That's not true. You can always grow. You can always develop. You can always do better. All right, so these are some of the sources of conflict that areas where conflict can come from, where a lack of management of that conflict can lead to that rancor, can lead to a lack of productivity, can lead to stagnation. So how do we deal with this? Like how do we manage conflict the right way? So I'm going to be talking specifically about a tool that we use. So this conflict management is actually a class that we teach for our federal clients. We can do it over 2 days or 3 days. And we use this instrument. Some of you may have heard of it. A Thomas Killman instrument is based on the work of Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Killman. And it's a very popular instrument. If you are familiar with the Myers-Briggs Corporation, that they are the ones that created the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. They are the ones who sell this instrument as well. It basically measures your most frequently used conflict management style along an assertive and cooperative axis. Now, this is not like a personality type assessment. It's more of just assessing how you respond to conflict, or how you most frequently manage conflict. Okay, so we're not going to go into the details of the assessment because we only have a few minutes here to discuss this, but I did want to go over the 5 different conflict management styles. Again, the purpose of this is for you to look at where you think you fall and see what you use the most, right? And understand how can you may have been using it but not really realizing what it is. Again, I want to preface by saying you may have a particular style that you use most frequently, but that doesn't mean that you cannot use the other styles or you don't use the other styles. And then there are different circumstances and situations that call for you to use a particular style of conflict management. But it's important, if you can, and if you want to take this assessment, and there's a fee associated with it, and you want to dig a little bit deeper into this, please feel free to send us an email. We'll put our contact information, and we can send you an assessment and kind of debrief with you on your style on a one-on-one basis. But this is really fascinating, and it will really uncover a lot of blind spots for you, especially if you're leading a team or you're part of a team, or if you're dealing with a conflict situation that has gone sour, that has gone really horrible and is stifling your work. All right, so the 5 major styles of competing style. Okay, so this style is basically assertive and uncooperative. What does that mean? So the assertive axis, it means that, okay, when you're assertive, it means that I'm willing to find a solution. I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm getting it backwards. Assertive means I am going to be forthright about the fact that I want to find a solution. That's a distinction between that. I'm forthright about it. I'm upfront about it, right? That I want to find a solution. Uncooperative axis means I am not likely to give in. Okay, so assertive, I'm forthright or I'm laid back. Uncooperative or cooperative means I am more likely to give in or less likely to give in. Okay, uncooperative means I want my way. Cooperative means I'm okay with looking into other people's options and giving and giving a little bit. All right. So the focus is, if you have a competing style of managing conflict, your idea is to win. Your priority is to win. You don't really care about, I would say, not the feelings, but the perspective of others. You're not really looking at down second line or third line consequences of the outcome. Your goal when you are competing is to win. Okay, now, if this is your primary style, that's great. Again, there's no right, wrong, good, or bad. But you want to look at one of the things, the feedback that you can get from taking the Thomas Killman assessment is, how does this style, if you have a primarily competing style, how does that affect you when you're working with a collaborator or a compromiser or someone who avoids or an accommodator, right? And what instances might you want to pull back and lean into the other styles of conflict management so that you have a better outcome down the line? Now, I would say in terms of the competing style, we are a government contractor. We compete for our work. So a lot of times we are in that mode. We are in that winning mode, right? But when we are actually executing on a project where there are multiple stakeholders and they're competing and sometimes conflicting priorities, we have to adjust on the competing style, all right? So that's it for that. The next one is collaborating, the collaborating style, okay? So collaborating says, yes, I am intentional and I'm expressing that I do want to resolve the conflict, or I want us to get to a good outcome for everyone. And I'm also going to be willing to listen to other people's point of view and incorporate it. I may not agree with everything, but I'm willing to listen and incorporate it. Okay, so this idea is both assertive and cooperative, and the focus is making sure that everybody gets a win. It's what sometimes you hear people say, it's a win-win. Everybody gets something. May not get everything, but everybody gets something. Compromise is unassertive and uncooperative. This is interesting. You wouldn't have thought that when you think about compromise. People use that word all the time. It's let's compromise. Let's come to a compromise. The thing about compromise is that it is the thing that sometimes makes compromise not as effective is that compromise, there is no incentive to get to a resolution. It's unassertive. There is no set intention. There is no push to get to a resolution. So, for example, if you look at our political sphere, Congress, you hear them say, well, compromise is the way to go. But you see that nothing gets done. Why? Because it's unassertive. There is no push. There is no assertive push to say we want to get something done. And so it's a 50-50. It's give and take. It's kind of like a meeting in the middle. And another thing about compromise is who determines where the middle is, right? Again, because it's unassertive and it's kind of ambiguous, get it. What is that middle? What is that 50-50? How do you define your 50 versus my 50? So again, compromise is good when it's clearly defined, when both parties agree on what the middle is. I think that's the first foundation for compromise. Avoiding is also unassertive and cooperative. So compromise and avoiding are on two different spectrums, right? So I would say compromise sometimes is a lot of action to get to the middle. Avoiding is hands-off approach. It's unassertive and it's uncooperative as well. Okay, so avoiding is looking at the time and the stress and the cost of going through or managing the conflict to get to the particular outcome and just simply saying it's not worth it. I'm not going to do it. So you see a lot of people who have this avoiding style as a primary way of managing conflict. You see procrastination, you see deferment, you see deliberation, like it's just pushing it to somebody else, not wanting to deal with it because they have made an assessment that the time and the stress of and the cost of going through managing that conflict is just not something that they want to do. Okay, so that's the avoiding style. And then the accommodating style is unassertive and cooperative. Okay, so this is where you are not clearly defined on wanting to get an outcome, right? But it's basically saying, I want everybody to get along, so I'm just going to give in all the time. Okay, so it's just basically yielding. It's basically accepting other people's ideas as yours, basically. Okay, and so that's yielding on mainly everything except on important issues, except on one or two stickler points where you will stand up and say, no, I don't agree to that. But otherwise, you're accommodating. You find a way to make it work. You find a way to fit everybody in. I want to hear from the group. Is anyone resonating with this? What do you think your style is? I'm going to pause for a little bit and get some feedback from the group. What do you think your style is? And I will also say, how do you think that is related to your team and maybe some of the potential challenges that you're having with managing conflict? So I have a raised hand. Kenny, I'm going to unmute you so that you can ask your question or chime in, okay? You're self-muted, so if you could unmute yourself, or if you just want to type in your question in the question box, that's fine. You're still muted, Kenny, but you have your hands raised. So do you want to type in your question in the question box? Or your comments or thoughts? If you don't want to be unmuted. Okay, so Martiza says she's more of the collaborating style. That's interesting. Collaborating style. Also, Kendra says I'm mostly collaborating and sometimes accommodating, depending. Okay. So does anybody want to expand a little bit more? We have a few minutes. I want to hear from Kendra, and that's interesting that you say you're collaborating and accommodating depending. Do you want to shed a little bit more light on that? Because I think that's really key, that you use your style depending on a situation. So what might be the situations that you would use collaborating versus accommodating. I'm going to unmute you, Kendra. I'm trying to unmute you, Kendra, but you muted yourself. Okay, you are muted right now, so you can speak.
Yes, hi. I can hear you. So for me, I'm mostly collaborating because I try to. I'm a team lead for my company that I work with. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
in cybersecurity, and
Okay.
I'm one of the team leads in charge of um a team of 8 where we conduct assessments for federal government agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm majority mostly collaborating because I always try to work with my team and even upper management, to make the best decisions for the client. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, I have to agree to disagree on certain deliverables or maybe styles of the deliverables or maybe even the way we work together to get to the end product. In certain instances, I'm accommodating in the sense that depending on what the task or the deliverable is, you know, uh, if one of my staff has a different opinion or a way that they think that they can get it done, but the end result is the same, then to me, I can be accommodating in the sense that it's not a big deal if they do it their way, as long as the end result is what the client needs. But the flip side is um, I'm accommodating, but I'll push back on important issues if their way does not provide what the client needs. Because at the end of the day, the client is who we're here to serve. So that's
Mm-hmm.
always my end goal is always that, I'll decide whether or not I'm being collaborative or accommodating, depending on what will get us the end goal of basically making sure the customer is satisfied.
Oh wow, thank you so much, Kendra. That's a great insight, and that is so appropriate in how you can use your conflict management style depending on the situation. And I think what you said was really critical when it came to accommodating. You said, yes, I'll be accommodating. I'm okay. Like if you have a different way of doing things that will still get us to the goal, I'm not particularly concerned about how you do your work. But when it comes to something that concerns the client's needs, that's when I'm going to step in, and if it's not in line with that. And I think that that's interesting because that's a great deal of self-awareness, that you understand the distinction between, okay, if it's within us in the team here and it doesn't affect the client's need negatively, I'm flexible with that, I'm okay. But if it's something that has to do with the client needs, that's when I'm going to step in, even though I'm accommodating. I think what I would say is look at this more broadly than with your team. So someone like you, Kendra, if you want to take this assessment with your team, it will be a good exercise. I'm just using it as an example to not just see your conflict style, but also your team members' conflict style. And it's funny when we do this exercise, you see people get aha moments, so like, oh, now I understand why you and I always bump heads on this particular thing, right? It's because of the different styles and where they intersect together when we're trying to actually walk through a situation. I want to see if I can get to one more question. Um, one more question here. Thank you so much, Kendra. That was really good. Somebody, I flex between styles. I can't see your name. I flex between styles depending on the issues. Most of the time, I try to be collaborating, but sometimes, so this is Kenny. Sometimes I feel the need to be avoiding when I'm dealing with individuals that I know won't bend. I usually find a workaround for compromising individuals. This is really interesting. So, Kenny, do you want to be unmuted or not? Because can you just type that? So Kenny has a different take. He is more collaborating, but also says he tries to be avoiding when he's dealing with individuals who he knows will not bend. So this is spot on with what the assessment does, because the key thing is Kenny has made a cost, right? So like I'm not going to be going back and forth with you because I understand that you're not going to bend, right? I've worked with you long enough. I understand your your position, your mindsets, your personality type. So when it comes to certain issues, I'm not even going to bother with that, and that's appropriate in some cases, right? Because you do have a certain level of mental resources, and you want to use it, to the best of your, for the best possible outcome, and for the best possible outcome. So calculating the costs, right, of going through or managing that conflict in a particular situation. Avoidance can also be a style that you use for particular situations and for particular individuals if you are in that same local space. Thank you so much, Kenny. We are almost out of time. I just wanted to show that. So this is the axis I was talking about. Assertiveness is the decision to want to do something about the conflict or not. So if you're at avoidance, you are low on assertiveness. If you're accommodating, you're also low on assertiveness. If you're competing or you're collaborating, you are high on assertiveness because you're trying to get to an end goal. You're trying to get to a particular outcome. If you are cooperating, meaning that you're willing to yield, you're willing to be open, right? If you're avoiding, you are low on cooperating because you're not trying to be bothered with it, right? And if you're competing, you're trying to get your outcome to win. So you're also low on cooperating. So yes, you want an outcome, but you are less likely to take other people's perspective into play. And then if you are accommodating, you are high on cooperativeness, because you're giving maybe a little bit too much, giving in a little bit too much to other people. And if you're collaborating, you're also high on cooperativeness. You're willing to take in and make sure that everybody gets some win. Am I right? May not be everything that they want, but everybody gets some win. So I would say there's no right or wrong. Compromise is in the middle. Again, what I said about compromise, and people don't really think about it when they use that word compromise. Compromise is low assertiveness and low cooperation, and it's coming into the middle. It's 50-50. The question is, where is the middle? And that's where compromise can be funny. There is a place for compromise if they're clearly defined, if there's a clearly defined line across the spectrum and a clearly defined where middle is. There's a place for compromise. All right. So this is kind of like the diagram that shows the different styles and where you are. And this is our contact information. Please, I do want to hear from you guys. Oh, Kenny said unmute me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. I'm going to still unmute you. I want to give you a chance to share a little bit, even though we're at time, but it's still saying that you're self-muted. So I can't unmute you if you mute yourself. There you go. Now you're unmuted. Kenny, you're unmuted. You can speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So my comment was that in the case of being avoiding, a lot of times for me, not with my actual team, but that's with people who are above my status, who I know is pretty much their way or no way, and that doesn't solve the purpose of working with our internal customer or our external customer. So a lot of times I just find a workaround until that person sees that the workaround is working, and come over to that side. But there's just no arguing with someone else, and it would create, like you said, a lot of frustration and opportunity cost lost to do that. So, but otherwise, I'm mostly collaborating because I would like to see everyone have their say in or add and contribute to something.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that there's wisdom in what you said when you're dealing with senior level management. And again, some of us, and I do have a more leaning towards a competing style, but that's wisdom in what you said, because if there's a way to still get the attention of your senior level management that may be a little bit more set in their ways, as opposed to going toe to toe and competing, by more finding a workaround, like you said, and showing them, and then getting their attention that way, and then pulling them into a collaborative effort. So I think that you can use these styles in so many different ways to get the outcome that you want. And I thought it was really great that you pointed that it's opportunity cost. It's not really going to get you where you need to go if you keep butting heads with them. So the avoiding is like a caveat to find a workaround and still get the attention and pull them in to collaborate. So that's really interesting. I totally enjoy that. All right, so this is my contact information. Please send me an email if you want to take the assessment and delve more deeper into this or work with this with your team. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for attending today and have a fantastic day.